Hey there, and welcome back to the Illuminated Shelf podcast, your go-to channel for inspirational self-help and spiritual book insights. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Peter. In each episode, we dive into the key insights, practical tips, and a little author background to guide you on your journey. Your support means the world to us. Be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new episodes.
Ready to explore today's book topic? Let's get started. Welcome to your personalized deep dive. Today, we're cracking open conversations with God. Now, I know the title might sound a bit
out there.
Well, yeah, a bit out there. But trust me, this book is far from your typical spiritual text.
It's true. The author, Neale Donald Walsch, claims to have had direct conversations with God.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you take that literally or metaphorically, the ideas presented are thought-provoking, to say the least. We're going to be diving into excerpts from the foreword and a couple of key chapters to explore everything from Neale's personal journey to the nature of God itself.
Okay, so let's start with the man behind the curtain.
Okay.
Neale was going through a rough patch when this whole conversation began. He was feeling lost, like a total failure, and in a moment of frustration, he actually yells at God.
Wow.
Expecting, of course, nothing but silence in return.
Right, but silence wasn't what he got. Instead, this voice, this presence starts responding.
Yeah.
And that's how Conversations with God was born.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting is that this divine voice isn't what you might expect.
Right.
It's not booming or preachy. It's actually quite conversational, almost like a wise friend offering guidance.
So in the foreword, Neale talks about feeling embarrassed by his life. He admits to making mistakes, hurting people, and generally feeling lost.
Right.
It's raw and honest.
Yeah.
Which I think makes the subsequent dialogue even more powerful.
Right, because it grounds the conversation in a shared human experience.
Yeah.
We've all been there feeling lost, questioning our choices, wondering if we're on the right path. And then smack dab in the middle of that very human struggle, Neale claims to have this divine encounter.
And in chapter 1, this God voice throws us a curveball.
Oh.
It says that words are inherently limiting
Okay.
and that feelings are the true language of the soul. Which, when you think about it, makes sense. We've all experienced miscommunication due to words being misinterpreted or taken out of context.
It's fascinating, isn't it? We often think of spiritual texts as being all about the words, about deciphering hidden meanings and interpretations.
Right.
But here, God is saying, hey, don't get too hung up on the words.
Yeah.
Tune into the feelings, the essence of what's being communicated.
But then God also acknowledges the irony.
Yeah.
It chose to communicate through words in this book in order to reach a wider audience, to spark these conversations and hopefully inspire us to tap into that deeper level of feeling and knowing.
And that brings up an interesting point about responsibility.
Okay.
If we're all capable of receiving divine guidance directly, then we're also responsible for interpreting it. That can feel a bit daunting, right?
Yeah,
I mean, who are we to decide what God really means?
Exactly. But God reassures us that there are no special people or special times when it comes to receiving divine communication.
Okay.
Every single one of us is capable of tapping into that source. Every moment holds the potential for connection. It's all about whether we're open to listening.
Okay, so let's talk about the elephant in the room. The nature of God. This is where things get really mind-bending.
Okay.
God admits to appearing in many forms, cautioning us not to get fixated on one image. It even says, I am what I am not, which is like trying to wrap your head around infinity.
I know.
Right.
It makes you realize how limited our human understanding of the divine really is. And then there's this whole idea about asking God to prove its existence.
Right.
The book basically says it's a pointless exercise because we each experience God differently through the filter of our own beliefs and perceptions.
That's a powerful concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
It shifts the focus from external proof to internal knowing. It's not about convincing others or adhering to dogma. It's about cultivating a personal relationship with the divine, however that manifests for you.
All right, so let's talk about a question that has plagued humanity for centuries.
Go.
If there's a God, why is there so much suffering in the world? Why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah.
You'd think a divine being would step in and fix things, right?
Well, God's response in the book is pretty radical. He doesn't claim to cause or control events,
Okay.
but rather observes us creating them. We're not just passive bystanders in this cosmic play. We're active participants shaping our reality with our thoughts, words, and actions.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack. So you're saying we're not victims of circumstance, but co-creators of our own reality,
Hmm.
that we actually have more power than we realize.
Yes.
It's both empowering and a little terrifying, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's a complete shift in perspective.
Right.
We tend to blame external forces for our misfortunes, but conversations with God suggest that we have more agency than we give ourselves credit for.
Mm.
Even in the face of calamity, we have the power to choose how we respond, how we interpret events, and ultimately how we move forward.
Wow. So if we're creating our reality, does that mean suffering is somehow our fault?
That's where we'll pick up in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We'll explore God's perspective on suffering free will and what it really means to be a co-creator in this grand cosmic adventure. But before we move on, is there anything that stands out to you so far?
Hmm.
Any particular idea or phrase that's making you think differently?
Uh,
We'd love to hear your thoughts. So let's pick up with that mind-blowing idea
okay.
that we're not just living our lives, we're actually creating them.
Hmm.
Now, this raises a big question.
Hmm.
If we're responsible for our reality, does that mean suffering is somehow our fault?
It's a question I've wrestled with myself.
Oh.
Is it all on us? I mean, sometimes life throws us curveballs that seem completely out of our control.
Right. And the book acknowledges that we don't always consciously choose our experiences,
Yeah.
but it suggests that our subconscious beliefs, fears, and expectations play a huge role in shaping our reality.
So it's not about blame, but about understanding the power of our minds. That even if we don't consciously create every event, we can choose how we respond to it, how we interpret it, and ultimately how we let it affect us.
Exactly. And that brings us to the idea of free will, which Conversations with God tackles in a really nuanced way.
Okay.
It's not about having complete control over everything that happens, but rather about recognizing the choices we do have within any given circumstance.
So even in the midst of suffering, we still have the power to choose our attitude, our perspective, and our actions.
Yes. And that's where the true growth happens.
Yeah.
It's not about avoiding suffering altogether,
Okay.
but about using it as a catalyst for transformation.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these concepts are connected. We're co-creators of our reality. We have free will to choose our responses, and suffering can actually be a catalyst for growth.
It's like a tapestry, isn't it?
Yeah.
Each thread is interconnected, creating a beautiful and complex whole.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of interconnectedness,
Right.
let's dive into the book's perspective on relationships.
Perfect segue. Because if we're all co-creating reality and influencing each other,
Yeah,
relationships become even more significant.
absolutely. Conversations with God suggest that relationships are not just about finding someone to make us happy, but about using the interaction to learn and grow.
That resonates with me. I've definitely been guilty of looking for the one who will complete me, only to realize that true fulfillment comes from within.
The book challenges that finding your other half notion. Instead, it suggests that we're already whole and complete. And relationships are opportunities to see ourselves reflected back in new and sometimes challenging ways.
So it's less about finding someone who fits a preconceived mold and more about using the relationship as a mirror for self-discovery.
Exactly. It's about understanding that the purpose of relationships, romantic or otherwise, is to help us evolve into the best versions of ourselves.
Okay.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The book argues that putting yourself first in a relationship isn't selfish.
Okay.
It's actually crucial for a healthy connection.
Wow. That goes against everything we've been taught about love and sacrifice. Explain that one to me.
Think about it this way. If you're constantly trying to please your partner, neglecting your own needs and desires,
Yeah.
resentment is bound to build up. That's not a recipe for a sustainable relationship.
It's like they say on airplanes.
Right. Put on your own oxygen mask before assisting others. You can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. And by prioritizing your own growth and well-being, you actually become a better partner, more capable of giving and receiving love in a healthy way.
The book also talks about the importance of supporting each other's journeys rather than clinging or demanding.
Right. It's about recognizing that each person has their own path to walk, their own lessons to learn. And that brings us to another mind-blowing concept from Conversations with God. There is not but.
Okay, break that down for me.
It's essentially a statement of ultimate oneness. It suggests that at the deepest level, we're all interconnected, all part of the same divine source.
So it's like we're all individual expressions of the same universal energy.
Precisely. And if we truly grasp that concept, it changes everything.
Okay.
It means harming another is ultimately harming ourselves, and loving another is an expression of self-love. Okay, I can see how that ties into relationships. If we recognize the divine in everyone, even those who challenge us, it shifts the whole dynamic of how we relate to each other.
Now let's shift gears and talk about something a little more tangible.
All right.
Money. In chapter 11, Neale asks God a question I think a lot of us can relate to.
Okay.
Why can't he attract enough money in his life?
Yeah.
Is he destined to struggle financially forever?
It's the classic money and spirituality dilemma. We're taught that money is the root of all evil, yet we also want to live comfortably and have financial security. It's a confusing message.
Right. And Conversations with God offers a fresh perspective. It's not about self-worth, as some spiritual teachings suggest,
Okay.
but about our thoughts about money. The book points out that Neale, like many people, carries around this belief that money is somehow bad or incompatible with spirituality.
So our beliefs about money are actually shaping our experience of it.
Exactly. And God clarifies that money itself is simply energy neutral in and of itself.
Okay.
It's our beliefs and attitudes that determine how it flows into or out of our lives.
Okay, so if we want to change our financial situation, we need to change our beliefs about money. But how do we do that? It's one thing to intellectually understand that money is just energy, but it's another thing to shift our deeply ingrained emotional patterns around it.
The book suggests a really practical approach. Act generously before your thinking holds you back. It's about reversing the usual thought-word-deed paradigm.
So instead of waiting for our thoughts to catch up, we can take actions that align with the beliefs we want to cultivate.
Precisely.
Whoa.
By acting generously, even when our minds are screaming, you can't afford it.
Right.
We start to reprogram our subconscious beliefs about money. We demonstrate to ourselves and the universe that abundance is possible.
It's like fake it till you make it for the soul.
Exactly. And over time, those actions will start to shift our thoughts and feelings, creating a new reality where financial flow and abundance are the norm.
I love that. It's empowering to realize that we have more control over our financial situation than we might think.
Now let's talk about finding your Kali Do. Calling that elusive thing we all seem to be searching for. In chapter 9, God has a very simple message for Neale and for all of us.
Okay.
Do what you love, nothing else. No excuses, no compromises.
That's easier said than done, right? I mean, we have bills to pay, families to support, responsibilities to fulfill. Sometimes it feels like our dreams have to take a back seat to real life.
The book acknowledges those survival concerns, but it also reminds us that we have a right to joy. It's not about denying our obligations, but about finding a way to align our work with our soul's true desires.
So it's not about quitting your job tomorrow and becoming a starving artist, but about finding ways to infuse your current work with more passion and purpose.
And if that's not possible, it might be time to start exploring other options. The book encourages us to see our work as a statement of who we are. If we're spending our days doing something that drains us, it sends a message to the universe that we're not worthy of fulfilling work.
Wow, I never thought of it that way. It's not just about finding a job that pays the bills. It's about finding work that allows us to express our unique gifts and talents to make a meaningful contribution to the world.
Exactly. And God encourages us to find work that makes us happy and supports others. It's not an either proposition.
Yeah.
We can do well and do good.
It's inspiring to think that our work can be an extension of our spiritual practice, a way to bring more love and light into the world.
This deep dive has already covered so much ground, and we've only just scratched the surface. In the next part, we'll delve into even deeper questions.
Okay.
Past lives, the body, and health, those big existential questions about the end of the world and the existence of one true religion.
I'm especially intrigued by the book's perspective on health. The idea that we have more control over our physical well-being than we realize is fascinating and a little bit daunting, too.
It definitely challenges us to take responsibility for our health, both physical and mental.
Right.
But before we dive into that,
Right.
what are your thoughts? What's resonating with you most from what we've covered so far?
Okay, so we've explored some pretty mind-blowing concepts from Conversations with God so far.
Yeah.
We've talked about co-creating our reality,
Right.
the power of free will, the true purpose of relationships, and even our often conflicted relationship with money.
It's a lot.
But there's still so much more to uncover.
Right. We've only just dipped our toes into the cosmic pool. So let's dive deeper into some of those big existential questions
Okay.
that often come up
Yeah,
when we ponder the nature of reality and our place in it.
I'm ready to go deep. Let's talk about past lives.
Okay.
It's a concept that fascinates me, but I also have a lot of questions. If reincarnation is real, who were we in those past lives?
Right.
And how do those experiences affect us now?
In chapter 14, Neale asks those very same questions. He's curious about his own past lives and the whole concept of karmic debt,
Okay.
this idea that we're carrying around baggage from previous lifetimes.
I've heard a lot about karmic debt, and it always seemed a bit heavy, like we're being punished for things we did in past lives that we don't even remember.
Yeah, the book addresses that concern directly. God confirms the existence of past lives. Neale has had 647, to be exact,
Wow.
but dismisses the idea of karmic debt as punishment or obligation.
Okay, that's a relief. So we're not doomed to repeat patterns or suffer consequences for past misdeeds.
Exactly. Instead, God suggests that our past lives are opportunities for growth and expansion. We've experienced it all, the good, the bad, the heroic, the cowardly, and each lifetime contributes to the evolution of our soul.
I love that perspective. It's like we're on this grand cosmic adventure, trying on different roles, exploring different aspects of ourselves,
Right.
and learning valuable lessons along the way.
It's like a cosmic game where the goal isn't to win or lose,
Right.
but simply to experience and evolve. And that evolution continues into this lifetime. God reminds us that we're not obligated to do anything, but we do have certain things we want to experience and achieve in order to further our soul's growth.
So we're drawn to certain situations, certain relationships, certain challenges, because they offer us the opportunity to learn and grow in specific ways.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And even if we don't consciously choose those experiences, our soul, that deeper part of ourselves, is guiding us toward the lessons we need to learn.
Now let's talk about something a little more grounded, the body and health. In Chapter 10, God throws out a really thought-provoking statement.
Okay.
All illness is self-created.
I know it sounds radical, doesn't it?
It does.
But the book suggests that our thoughts are a powerful form of energy that can manifest in our physical reality.
Wait, are you saying our thoughts can actually make us sick?
It's not about blame,
Okay.
but about understanding that our minds and bodies are deeply interconnected. When we harbor negative thoughts,
All right. Yeah.
fear, worry, anger, self-doubt,
Yeah.
we create a sort of energetic blueprint for illness.
So it's not about denying the very real physical causes of illness, but about recognizing the role our thoughts and beliefs play in our overall well-being.
Exactly. And it's not just our conscious thoughts, but also our subconscious beliefs and patterns that can contribute to dis-ease. God even makes a funny observation.
Okay.
We often take better care of our cars than we do our own bodies.
I think a lot of us can relate to that. We're
Yeah.
so busy taking care of everything and everyone else that we neglect the very vessel that allows us to experience life.
The book encourages us to shift our focus inward, to become more mindful of our thoughts, to nurture our bodies with healthy habits, and to cultivate a deep appreciation for this miraculous physical form we inhabit.
It's about remembering that our bodies are not separate from our minds and spirits,
Right.
but an integral part of our whole being.
All right, ready to tackle some of those big existential questions?
Bring it on. I'm curious to hear what Conversations with God has to say about things like the end of the world, the second coming of Christ, and the existence of one true religion. These are topics that have been debated for centuries,
Yeah.
and I'm sure everyone has their own interpretation.
In chapter 14, Neale asks those very questions, and God acknowledges that these are complex topics that will be explored in greater depth in future volumes.
Okay.
But there's a key takeaway that resonates throughout the book.
All right.
We're not alone.
That's a comforting thought, especially when we consider the vastness of the universe and the mysteries of existence.
God assures us that divine guidance is always available if we're open to receiving it. We can hear God's voice in the truth of our soul, in the feelings of our heart, in the quiet of our mind.
Yeah.
It's about tuning in to that inner wisdom, that still small voice within.
So it's not about waiting for a grand revelation or a dramatic event, but about cultivating a deep connection with our own inner divinity.
And that connection, that inner knowing, is what ultimately empowers us to create a life of purpose, joy, and fulfillment.
Well, that was quite a journey. Conversations with God is definitely a book that challenges conventional thinking, sparks profound questions,
Yeah.
and ultimately invites us to embrace a more expansive view of ourselves and the universe.
It's a book you could revisit again and again, finding new layers of meaning each time. And as you continue to explore these ideas, remember to listen to that inner voice, that divine spark within you, because as Conversations with God suggests,
Yeah.
you already have all the answers you seek.
We'd love to hear what stood out to you in this deep dive. Did anything surprise you, challenge you, inspire you?
Yeah,
Leave us your thoughts and questions, and maybe we'll explore them in a future episode.
that's right.
Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep listening for that still small voice within. Thanks for joining us on the Illuminated Shelf podcast.
If you found our discussion helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who could use a dose of inspiration.
And remember, keep reading, keep growing, and we'll see you next time.